What's going on, guys? It is Travis here with the NPCs, and welcome to another weekly news roundup. It is February 10th, 2023. Today, we'll be talking about the Nintendo Direct from this week and all of the things that have been revealed in that and more. Of course, we'll also be talking about more drama in the Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard, King acquisition, all the chaos coming out of Sony with this one, too. And, of course, we'll also be talking about Nintendo announcing a Switch sales record, another one this time, and, of course, also announcing that they won't be laying off anybody in Japan. Shocker, especially with what's going on in the world. But, of course, this is the NPC's Weekly News Roundup, so we are going to just hop right into it. Let me just switch over here to that. There we go. Now we're live. We're up on the air. Of course, again, my name is Travis. That's Kyle over there to the right of me here, left of me there. Yes. Hey, Kyle.
What's up?
Well, what's up, man, is we've only got several stories really to talk about tonight, but we've got a lot of meat to just those couple stories. So I guess, what do you think? First thing actually we should do here before we get in any of the news stuff itself is kind of talk about the change that's going to be happening here. So this actually will be the last news live stream that we do for a while. There's a little bit of heavy lifting that goes into setting things up. I mean, there's title card stuff to set up. There's other things that go on, but at the same time, it's just for the podcast part itself. We take the audio after the news live stream is done, and we put that up on our podcast platform over on Anchor.fm, and it's just one of those things where it's like with the podcast itself, it's not necessarily being live. You get a little bit more freedom when it comes to editing things and kind of cleaning it up, making it the way you want. Sometimes with the news live streams, you just kind of, you kind of got to just jump in and go. And especially, I'll even admit, I know this isn't the case for Kyle, it's at least for me though, is that being a parent, having a kid come up or the animals running around, everything else going crazy as it normally does. So that's my telling of it, of course. But I think Kyle agrees with me at least that, we're gonna pull back on the news live streams at least going forward, and you'll be able to at least catch the news. We'll do weekly news roundups still every week. You'll just have to subscribe to our podcast platform to be able to check those out.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think it'll be a nice change. Give us a little bit of a reprieve. Maybe we can come out with a little bit different content potentially as far as video, but I think going forward, the news stream is going to remain as podcast, at least for the time being.
Yeah, exactly. We've already discussed kind of some new formatting for at least some things that we do put up, because if you've probably noticed, if you go back and look at our channel, there hasn't really been a steady stream of any sort of content at all. The last thing that was put up was when we had our 3-year anniversary last year, and even before that were a couple video game related things, but a lot of that is just kind of fallen by the wayside, unfortunately, just because life happens to get in the way. We don't do this full time. This is literally just a part-time gig because we like talking about video games. So be on the lookout for at least what we're going to be coming up with that may be starting up this next week. We'll have to see exactly what's going to happen. But in the meantime, of course, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's news roundup here that we are, of course, doing live right now. Of course, if you're listening to it after the fact, there you go. But let's just hop right into it with the first news story for this week, and that is the Nintendo Direct recap. So yes, that's right. On the 8th of February, that would be Wednesday, Nintendo graced us with around about 40 to 50 minutes of juiciness, at least in regards to things coming out for the Switch through probably at least the next, I would say maybe 6 months. 6 months to a year at least is what the timetable looks like for most of this. I mean, Kyle, you actually were able to watch it live. I had to kind of pick up the pieces after the fact. Like, out of curiosity, when you watched it live, like, what was the chat looking like for that, though? Like, was it blowing up like mad with everything, generally like how Nintendo does their stuff?
Honestly, I checked the chat like twice, and it was during the Prime announcement and at the very end. Other than that, I had the actual broadcast full screened, so I didn't see any of the chat, unfortunately, that was going on elsewise.
That's all right. I can at least say that going back and rewatching the Nintendo Direct, yeah, it definitely looked like things were hopping, things were popping, things were going crazy. Just a lot of good things announced. And this is not going to be in the order that things were announced. We'll just kind of hop right into it based on the list that we have here. And so, of course, one of the things people are kind of wondering about right now is what's going on with Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Well, fortunately, we had a brand new trailer dropped from Nintendo showing off some things, at least coming up in the next entry into the Legend of Zelda series, the follow up to the ever popular Breath of the Wild. So obviously, we're of course back in Hyrule with this game, Kyle, and it
Hmm.
looks like everything's kind of gone almost like a Skyward Sword style, where you've got a lot of like floating islands and not necessarily like full civilizations up in the air, but more like little villages and such that seem to be floating around. Um, but I have the audio muted here because we'll get copyright striked by Nintendo on this one pretty
Right.
fast. But the emphasis, of course, is that Ganon seems to be back. There's actually a voiceover in here that might be Ganon, might not be. I don't know exactly who it could have been. But yeah, you're basically back exactly where you were in Breath of the Wild. Now, this time, though, you've got some new enemies to take on. You've got some new powers, of course, in your quote unquote utility belt, I guess, if you want to put it like that. Um, but a lot of the emphasis seems to be on just these newfound powers that I guess almost seem like kind of an upgrade to stasis is about what I
Yeah.
think it is.
Or at least what people began to use stasis for anyway. Um, there was a lot going on in the trailer. I mean, the one of the big things, of course, was the car-like vehicle that was towards the end of the actual trailer. That I don't know what was going on with that, but it's
There
almost
it
like
is
they
right
took
there. Yeah.
a page out of like the Banjo Kazooie nuts and bolts from 360 or something.
Yeah. And a lot of people are saying the same thing. They're making the exact same comparison to that as well. Um, they're making the exact same comparison for that part exactly is that it's like, oh, it's like Legend of Zelda meets Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Um,
Right. And I mean, you get a
yeah,
drone at one point that they showed. So there's definitely lots of different mobility that's going around.
yeah,
At one point, they show Link with it almost looks like an arm that's made of stone or maybe a prosthetic of some sort. So there might be some sort of power related to that based on the amiibo that they've announced as well. Kind of hard to say, but that I mean, they're already saying the game is going to be like 18 gigs. So on a physical cartridge, that means that they have to put it on the largest size 32 gig card.
yeah, and that I guess has actually now been confirmed to be the largest Switch game release ever now.
Hmm.
Um, which I mean sets it up for whatever the next console is because I mean you think you're cramming that much stuff in, that next console is going to end up having to read probably that size games, if not even larger. And you got to think about the amount of quality that you could potentially pack into something like that too. Um,
Right.
but thinking back on the arm part, though, especially like what we saw there in the trailer with Link and that new ability, it almost gives me like Princess Mononoke vibes, where it's like the arm, like he's been touched by some type of curse, like Ganon touched him with a curse or something, and the stone.
Yeah.
But instead of it being just the arm with the like with the curse on it, instead it's like it's wrapped up in stone or something like a the mythical stones or what have you that are all spread around Hyrule, or like what the guardians were made out of, and that's
Yeah.
used
Or
to
maybe
help kind of
he's
like keep it
being
under control.
resealed or something.
Or that too, yeah, especially
Yeah.
given the fact that yeah, you start out Breath of the Wild with him basically awakening. Um, but where it stands right now, though, at least with the game, of course, is it's still on track to release May 12th of this year. Pre-orders are already up and out there right now too. Which one thing to make note of is that will be the first Nintendo Switch game that will cost $69.99 for the regular version. So Nintendo has finally crossed the threshold and joined its peers at releasing $69.99 games. So
Well, maybe. I
they,
mean, this is one. I mean, a bunch of the ones that are on the list that were announced are still regular or lower priced as well. So it'll be hard to say if they're gonna fully make that jump, but I could see them making it with some of those first party titles.
yeah, especially I think that's going to be yeah, I think especially first party, like whatever, like the sequel to Odyssey, like Mario Odyssey could be, or
Right.
uh, oh, what's the other thing there? It's not just Mario Odyssey, but you know what I'm getting at. Like, I don't think they announced the price for the upcoming Pikmin title either, but
No, they have not.
so it's possible that could be the same way too. So
Yeah.
Yeah, hang on. I got a cat playing with my cords down here. You silly cat. Literally, I just see these cords bouncing over here, and it's like, what the heck is going on? Silly cat underneath the desk. Anyway, um, so yeah, pre-orders are all up, including the collector's edition. In your standard deluxe edition, collector's edition comes with like a steel book. Comes with a well, let's see here. Yeah, okay, I'm still streaming here. I've just got some stuff that just seemed like it crashed on me for some strange reason. That's all right. I'll get things back up. Oh, I even lost you too, Kyle. Nope, there we go. All right.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Again, this is why talking about doing the live the stuff not live anymore, because we just seem to kind of like have these technical issues that kind of pop up as well too. Anyway, yeah, you get Steelbook, you get I believe some sort of like art scroll as well. You also get some like collector's pins as well. The base game, the Steelbook that you can put the game in if you want to. But again, May 12th is when that's going to drop. Moving on to the next game, though, that we had announced as well, too. This was actually kind of what opened up the Direct itself, and that happened to be Pikmin 4, which I got to tell you, I am stoked for another Pikmin title. I am excited to see a Pikmin title.
Yeah, and it looks like we're gonna get introduced to some more Pikmin as well in this one, so that'll be kind of cool.
Yeah,
Because
agreed.
if I'm not mistaken, the ice Pikmin weren't in any of the previous games, correct?
As far as I was aware, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think they're one of the newer species we're gonna see. But I mean, besides the ice Pikmin, we also did see the addition of the dog-like creature that seems to be basically another assistant that can potentially take the place of 10 Pikmin on some jobs, or maybe more depending on the job.
I wonder if it's going to be one of those where it might be limited. Like, yeah, it might be able to it might be able to actually have that ability to be like, like you said, 10 Pikmin, but its use is limited. So it's like it saves you from having to use Pikmin for doing anything or for doing something,
Yeah.
but at the expense, of course, that you only get it every so often.
Right, right. And they do show the dog being used to like almost as like a raft to cross water with Pikmin. So I mean that there may be more utility that they're not even showing off in the trailer, that you'll have to solve more puzzles using the dog and various different Pikmin. So that's kind of another cool aspect out of the game. I mean, Pikmin's been always kind of a unique puzzle game in and of itself, but uh I don't know, it just adds another level to it.
It does. It adds another layer of uniqueness and support to it, though. Especially, no, you make an excellent point on that. Um, it definitely is updated, graphics wise and such. So, it's definitely looks exactly like you'd expect it to for, being a modern title. But of course, it's Pikmin. And, it doesn't
Right.
mean it loses any of its cartooniness. It doesn't lose any of the luster that we've come to know and love in this game series itself. And I'm just really excited that it's coming out here very soon. I don't know if I had the date written down anywhere for it, though. I believe they made mention of something about it sometime this year, but I can't remember when. Let me see if I can find my notes.
Because
here.
shoot,
Yeah,
even the
July.
last Pikmin release that they had was just the Wii U version, and that was what, 2 years ago now?
That's what it feels like. I found the
Yeah.
date here, July 21st. So yeah, this year is when the game's going to come out. So this summer's going
Yeah.
to be a fun one to have that, especially. Um, Moving on, though, of course, we move on to something that Kyle's actually very excited for, and that
Oh
happens
yeah.
to be none other than Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp. So how you feel about this one, Kyle?
Finally. Finally. Oh man. It's kind of funny that they announced this because what was it? Literally 2 or 3 days ago, uh you and I were talking while we were playing I think Final Fantasy or something, and about, what the future direct is going to be about, what day it was going to land. And I had kind of made a guess that they were going to try and shadow drop Advance Wars. Not quite a shadow drop, but I'm still really, really pumped for this one. It's one of my all-time favorites from Game Boy Advance, and to get both of them in a single pack is just awesome.
And it wasn't. I have to admit, it was not one that I myself played. Like I didn't. I think I might have attempted Advance Wars, but I think something about the strategy as a kid like eluded me that I couldn't actually like
Mhm.
pick it up or something. I can't explain it, but that's just kind of what sits in my head there, making me think like there was something about this though that I just didn't have nailed down right, and that's where I kind of lost interest with it. But because this is coming back, and maybe my attention span isn't as bad, I can give this one a shot though too.
Heck yeah.
But it comes out in April.
Of
You don't have long, at least.
Yeah, I was gonna say yeah, it comes out April 21st, so that'll be awesome. Really, really pumped for it. Because I mean, what was it? As of this month, I believe it's actually been delayed a year at this point. So, or maybe it was actually April that it was delayed a year from that time. So,
I think so, because the
it,
announcement was last year, but then, yeah, of course, all of the upheaval there in
yeah,
Ukraine really threw it off, because I believe the main developers for
right.
Advance Wars are out of the Ukraine area, right?
I don't believe so on that one. I think it was just kind of in almost like in solidarity, Nintendo decided to not
Oh.
release it.
Or to drop
Um,
a war game in the midst of this thing starting up, maybe, too.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. Don't want to be releasing violent things during a time where there's tension in the world. So,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
but carrying on from that, of course, there was the Splatoon 3 Battle Pass that was revealed. Of course, it is going to be paid for DLC for Splatoon 3. With the first pack, I believe, launching right after the the show. And they're relaunching Inkopolis with the expansion. With later on, it looks like some sort of mysterious story about the return of Inkopolis. And actually, it sounds like everything will be accessible in Inkopolis as it is in the new town from Splatoon 3, but uh, just your classic skins, and of course, now I have their figures behind me, and I can't even think of their names. Um, yeah,
For
the original two Squid hosts will actually be performing concerts during Splatfests.
Ah,
Uh, in
that's an interesting development.
yeah, so it'll be kind of cool.
Okay. Well, that's neat regardless, at least. I know there's a lot of people who are, still fans to this day of Splatoon, and the fact that
Oh heck
we've been
yeah!
able to get 3 games of it, and that Nintendo's been able to actually work to create a multiplayer game that actually has held up rather well outside of, Smash Brothers, in regards to
Hmm.
like online type play. Um,
Well, and in
it's definitely pretty
competitive
good.
online play too.
Yeah,
So
especially that, yeah.
yeah.
Um, so of course, yeah, you're right. Those are coming down the line here through spring is when those, of course, are all going to be dropping out there. I didn't see any direct dates or anything that mentioned or even said anything that's like, oh, it's available after the direct now. But I
Oh,
will,
okay, so yeah, the first one I want to say might be probably spring then. The last one is supposed to be end of the year,
yeah. But
so a little bit of a wait on that second one.
but you know what was available right after the direct though, Kyle?
Ooh,
That
another thing I was really pumped for actually.
yeah, and that is the fact that we have now got Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Pocket, and Game Boy Advance games heading to Nintendo Switch Online. So if you are a Nintendo Switch Online subscriber, just like you've been able to get games for the Super Nintendo, Nintendo. If you're a member of Expansion Pass, you have Sega games, and you've also got Nintendo 64 titles. Now you can also go ahead and take Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games with you. So we've got, of course, the showcase here going behind our head there, showing off some of the games here, like Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins, Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX. I believe they just showed there at the beginning the original Tetris game for Game Boy, which was really the biggest seller for Game Boy, like right off the bat. They've got Gargoyles Quest, which is just a Ghouls and Goblins spinoff. Game and Watch Gallery here. But needless to say, though, is that like have released all these games out there, and that have already showcased some of the games that are going to be coming out soon too. Things such as like the Pokemon trading card game that we played as kids on the Game Boy Color is going to be coming out for Switch Online for this set of it. And there was another one I saw that was stuck in my head too. I think it was an F-Zero title, but that might have been Game Boy Advance. So even with all these titles, of course, they're going to be playable the same way that they were back in the day on your Game Boy. You could also change the filters on it. So whether you want to play in the original Game Boy style, you want to play in the Game Boy Pocket style, or Game Boy Color, you can do that. And then any game that has multiplayer capability to it from that period in time will actually have it as well. There it was. Oracle of Seasons and Ages were the ones I was actually forgetting right there. Those games that did have some type of multiplayer to them, or even some that have been tweaked to add it, you'll be able to do that either online or local. Online, of course, with your friends. However, on the Game Boy Advance side, not only will you have multiplayer support, though, for titles that are going to be coming out, things such as Minish Cap, you've got Super Mario, you've got, was that Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3, F-Zero, I know is going to be one of the ones here. You've got, WarioWare. The key thing, though, is that this is going to be locked behind the expansion pass paywall. So you're not going to be able to just go get your Nintendo Switch online subscription and be able to play Game Boy Advance games. They're all going to be locked behind that expansion pass paywall. So you're going to have to go to expansion pass. But again, remember that gets you access, of course, to Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis games too. So if you're one who played more stuff on the Game Boy Advance, and maybe there's a couple titles that they show off here that you want to play again, then it might be worth it for you. But are you excited for any of the titles that they showed off in here, Kyle?
Yeah, actually, quite a few of the GBA titles, Metroid, Oracle of Seasons, and Oracle of Ages. I shoot, pretty much all the Game Boy Advance games, Minish Cap, WarioWare. They showed one of the Super Marios, and then of course Mario Kart for the Game Boy Advance. I really enjoyed that version. Of course, they are launching the new I want to say season of the Mario Kart expansion as well. But I mean, shoot,
Right.
Golden Sun, F-Zero. I could waste hours on just Game Boy Advance alone, honestly.
Oh, yeah. And the fact that it's like you can download them and just take them with you on the go, though, too. I
Mm-hmm.
was kind of hoping, you have to forgive me for this, Kyle, but I know that like when they had announced it, I was kind of hoping that you could just ditch using the Joy-Cons, turn your turn the Switch sideways so it was in portrait, and then just use
Mm-hmm.
on-screen buttons to control the Game Boy games.
Oh yeah.
Not Game Boy Advance specifically, but I'm talking like Game Boy. So you've got it sitting up, like a phone, for example, in this way instead, and then you could just hold it and play that way. I don't know. There was just something about it that I thought, it's like, man, that would be cool for them to do. But I know that's not how it's gonna work. So I'll sit back here in my little hole, kind of hoping
Meh.
for the best in the future. So
Never know. Never know. Maybe they'll come out with a filter for it. They'll be like the sideways filter, and it just puts it like the control pads at the bottom.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Some of the other stuff announced though too. Before we get into this other big one, at least, we had a tease for a new Professor Layton game, New World. It's called Professor Layton in the New World of Steam, but they have not done anything other than just teased it. Stuff like coming soon. Xenoblade Chronicles expansion Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Volume 3 expansion pass. Bunch of JRPG stuff as well too, especially one called Sea of Stars. Dance game
Mm-hmm.
called Samba de Amigo Party Central. That one, of course, looks more like you're
Yeah.
going to actually hold on to the Switch controllers, to the Joy
Yeah,
Cons
that
that are to it.
one's like another one in the vein from the Samba de Amigo from the Dreamcast era with where they launched the $150 maracas for the console that were only good for one game, and you only got one set of maracas, and it didn't even include the game.
Yeah,
Um,
no kidding.
of course, this is more like Dance Central mixed with some Samba de Amigo. I'm Samba de Amigo always had that kind of effect to it where you had to do the poses and whatnot, but I feel like it definitely leans towards the Dance Central or aspect of it. leaning into that party central side of things.
Yeah,
But
it does
yeah,
seem to have
continuing
that.
on, um, Fashion Dreamer, a new game basically about becoming a fashion influencer. You wander around, talk to people, tell them you like their fashion. You get to emulate other people's fashion, and then you can connect. I believe they said you can connect online and trade fashions with other people. So kind of an odd aspect. Yeah.
That is an interesting one, but I mean, there's obviously with what Nintendo consoles are generally like targeted at anyway. More family friendly, more of
Well,
that
and the
type
audience is
stuff.
so broad anymore
Oh, that
too.
especially on the Switch, yeah, it's very
Yeah.
broad. Um, yeah, we had that. Tron Identity got a new trailer too. Of course, that's going to be a visual novel Tron game, which I'm kind of excited about, but also kind of disappointed. I wanted something more like Tron Evolution, but
Mm-hmm.
oh well.
Dead Cells. They did talk more about the Castlevania expansion that is upcoming, where you'll get to. I believe they said it's something like 13 classic weapons, 29 original tracks with 8 remastered tracks from the game. But it looks like it is going to have more of a Castlevania aspect to it rather than just be straight Dead Cells. So it seems like there is its own story to go along with that one. And then of course Ghost Trick, that was I believe a DS game. That one you basically are someone that dies in an accident, and then using your ghost powers, you have to prevent the deaths of other people.
Hmm.
Yeah, it kind of looks interesting. You get to solve puzzles by using your ghost powers to manipulate objects to prevent other people's deaths. So,
Interesting. Okay. Um, we got stuff like what is it? Deca Police anime detective game, where you train and I roll my eyes at this in the metaverse. Um, you got Bayonetta, Cereza, and the Lost Demon. There's a new gameplay trailer out for that. Of course, we don't have that one up right now. Disney's Illumination Island coming out on the 28th of July. Fire Emblem Engage. They've got DLC announced. It's getting Veronica from Fire Emblem Heroes as DLC.
mhm.
Harmony: The Fall of Reverie is a game that's coming from Don't Nod, and that's coming out this June. I think that's another JRPG.
I
Um,
believe so.
yeah,
Yeah.
Octopath Traveler 2 got a trailer, and then if you're a Switch Online subscriber, I believe you can grab the demo of that and play that. And then,
And the save actually does transfer over from the demo to the actual game, which is something that's been more common with Square Enix games. So,
yeah, and that's one of those things I remember like really liking about Nintendo demos as of late is that it seems like
mhm.
they really do, or at least the devs there are willing to put out the effort there to make sure that the demo stuff will work with the actual in-game stuff too, that you can carry over some of that progress. It's one of those, I think it's another selling point to kind of help that it's like, oh, you played our demo, well, guess what, you go buy the game now, all that work you put in can come on. Okay, you want to come on
Right.
without clawing my legs to death? Okay, you can come on up here and we'll talk about Nintendo stuff, kitty cat. Okay, as I put a kitty cat in my lap now because he keeps on clawing at me. um We Heart Katamari Reroll is going to be dropping June 2nd. So Reroll being a remaster of it. And then that demo also again is up, but it's only for Switch Online subscribers. Magalore Epilogue for Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. Master Detective Archives Rain Code. I did not actually see that one in the direct. I must have missed that one. Which one was that one about, Kyle? Do you remember?
I don't remember rank code. I do remember the Magalore. Was kind of cool. It looked like you get to play as one of the bad guys from the Kirby games.
Okay.
So that was kind of neat.
Hmm.
Um, they are doing a remaster of Batten Kaitos 1 and 2 from the GameCube. The Epic Card Battler, epically long actually as well. Um, so that'll be coming out later this year. Fantasy Life will be getting a new entry as well. For those that enjoy the Fantasy Life series, and of course, as I said before, the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Wave 4 DLC comes out this spring with Birdo being added to the roster. So
Very
get
nice.
to enjoy playing as Birdo again.
All right, goodbye, cat. I need to send you on your way. Go over there. No, no, stop, stop it. No, no, Ben, Ben, come here and grab your cat, please. He is literally attacking me. You take him. Thank you, sir. Okay, had to have the kid grab the cat. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Well, let's go ahead and hop into the last little bit here of the announcement stuff. And this was definitely, I think, the bigger surprise for people anyway, though, too, is that we've been waiting on news for Metroid Prime 4 for a while now. One of the things that came up, though, so far is that you could pre-order the game, but we haven't seen anything else about it. So, of course, we've been given sort of a filler here with Metroid Prime Remastered. That's right. The game that definitely set records on the GameCube is back on the Switch and is available digitally now and physically starting, I believe, next week or the week after. But
21st.
the 21st. So not this next
Yep.
week, but the week after. Yeah. So you're talking about a game that seriously really, changed the perspective of things that you actually would play or how you'd actually play Metroid with Samus Aran and put it into a first-person shooter type, configuration. None of the side-scrolling sort of action, but now it's available for you to play on the Switch.
Well, and not only that, what people thought Nintendo console was capable of as far as graphics, and they've honestly outdone themselves from everything that I've heard. The new iteration, of course, did have a few different teams working on it, but with all the effort and long hours that they put into it, it definitely shows. Graphically, it just looks fantastic. Like that jump for the system that it needed, that the GameCube got when it was released on the GameCube. I feel like maybe the Switch gets a little bit of that, even though that it is a re-release.
You know that song, Kyle? The cat came back the very next day. The cat came back again. As you're talking to me, the cat literally came back and started clawing at me. So the cat came back and is in my lap again. No, you're right though about like the graphics part, especially like with the GameCube, is because the GameCube was up against some heavy hitters. The introduction of a new competitor being the Xbox. Sony continuing to dominate, of course, by introducing the PlayStation 2, which could play games and, of course, play DVDs. So, of course, Nintendo had to do their own wacky thing by using mini discs and a literal cube of a console that had some expansion ports along the bottom of it to be able to make it do more than what the base console, offered at least. But you were right, though, is that it definitely was one of those things that kind of had to basically say that Nintendo was capable of putting out at that time, we didn't really use the term AAA title, but they were able to put out a top tier, game that looked good and showed that it's like, hey, yes, these are the possibilities on our console. And I think we got some of that still down the line. I wouldn't say like every single game we got on the GameCube was something that looked great. But you could go back and look at like Twilight Princess. You could look at Star Fox Adventures, just to name a few. Those were games that really did set like the actual bar for graphics on the GameCube. But of course, the GameCube was still successful, just not at the level that I think Nintendo was hoping it was going to be. But of course, that was just because there was a new entrant into the market, and of course, Sega was on their way out as well too, because the Dreamcast hadn't done as well. So yeah, but I mean, you're waiting till the physical stuff drops here in a couple weeks, right, to pick up Prime?
Unfortunately, yeah, I was gonna wait for the physical copy.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched probably about 2 minutes of footage. I don't want to look at too much, just because I want to be able to experience it myself. But everything I've heard is just nothing but positive about that one. So definitely worth the pickup. If you haven't played it, you have to go pick it up, because it changed the Metroid format forever, honestly.
It did, yeah. And if you really think about it, we haven't really seen anything else since then that actually does that. I know we got a little
Hmm.
bit of that with the more recent Metroid title that came out in what was it? It wasn't this last October. It was 2 years ago, 2021. But it was still your side scrolling type Metroid game that everybody's come to know and love as like kind of the normal thing. But Serpent Knight makes a great comment here, though. He says in chat, "What excites me about the Metroid Prime remaster is that they're bringing back the target lock from the GameCube version that got nixed in its re-release on the Wii. So that means that this version that we're getting here for the Switch is actually the save for some graphical updates and such, is the more true to original version, except for one thing, Kyle. And I don't know if you
Hmm.
noticed this or not, but I've been hearing this about I've been hearing this complaint wise online. Apparently, and I remember this though too, is that in the GameCube version, when there was a bright enough explosion or flash, you could actually see the reflection of Samus's face on the inside of her visor. You can't in this one now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that little nuance bit there where it's like you'd have a big flash and you'd actually be able to see like the kind of silhouetted reflection, blurry-ish reflection there of Samus's face onto her visor.
Hmm.
Yeah, you don't have that anymore now.
That kind of makes me wonder if that's the system, or maybe that's just something they forgot to, re-put in, trying to perfect and make everything look so good,
Yeah,
in translating it over to the Switch. So
that's
I don't
very
know. It'd be
possible.
hard to say without, directly interviewing all the teams and saying what happened here. But
Yeah,
um, yeah.
but there is definitely more that came out from the direct. Of course, we really focused on a lot of the big ones and kind of just jumped through the list of the other things that were announced. But if you want to see more, go check out the direct yourself. Of course, you can catch all that over on Nintendo's YouTube page. Of course, while we did talk about all the good news, let's talk about some of the more annoying and frustrating news, and that is additional drama in the Microsoft Activision Blizzard King acquisition saga. So we got three specific things here to talk about. We'll start with the first one here, is where Bobby Kotick, the current CEO of Activision Blizzard, has said Sony is trying to sabotage the acquisition. So he goes on here to say, sorry, let me silence my phone there. He goes on, I guess he was talking to the Financial Times after the UK's Competitive and Markets Authority said the deal could reduce competition. But Kotick goes on to say that suddenly Sony's entire leadership team stopped talking to anyone at Microsoft. I think this is all Sony just trying to sabotage the transaction. The whole idea that we're not going to support a PlayStation or that Microsoft would not support the PlayStation, it is absurd. So it seems like Bobby Kotick is actually kind of frustrated because it seems like all conversation has stopped. Although it seems like conversation may have stopped at the corporate level in the sense of, I guess, whatever needs to happen needs to happen. But it seems like some of the other conversation may have, like, some other conversation must be continuing because there's some exclusive stuff going on, at least it looks like, for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, I believe, for Warzone related stuff coming up with Season 2 here soon, that's targeted specifically at the PlayStation 5. So obviously there is still a line of communication between Activision and Sony, but not between Sony and Microsoft, and Kotick is just kind of over it. And I hate to say this, I'm kind of in Kotick's, I'm kind of on the side of Kotick here on this one, that, Sony very well may have actually just stopped conversation, and it's frustrating.
I as much as I hate being on that dude's side because of everything in the last 2 years that we've covered, I think I am too. I feel like it is Sony just cutting off ties as far as communication goes and saying, no, we're not going to negotiate any longer. We've told you that we don't want it to happen, so it's not going to happen. And I don't think that's necessarily quite fair. I mean, it's almost like, well, you missed your opportunity to buy it, so you bought something else, and now you're having regret that you missed out on Activision Blizzard. Because if you think about the timeline between the announcement of this deal and them announcing that they were going to purchase Bungie and the entire Bungie deal going down, it's like stuff didn't quite add up as far as like Sony's qualms go. They've made their big purchase as well. They've got Destiny and frankly the guys that created the Halo franchise. So what do they really have to complain about? Are they really that afraid that they can't come up with a first person shooter in, the next year? They've still got two in the vaults that they could revitalize and probably make bank on, honestly.
They very well could. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Like even one example that was brought up that they could follow. Cat, stop playing with my mouse cable, please. Um, is that oh my god, stop playing with my mouse cable. You silly cat. Jesus Christ. Again, this is why recording offline would be anyway. One of the things is like it's like they could resurrect Resistance or Killzone
Mm-hmm.
or SOCOM. We've talked about this like several times before, but it's coming up in the conversations again. Though, is that it's like Sony has the ability to foster competition by bringing competition back, especially for those beloved games um, what do I say here? Um, Killzone and Resistance and such. Sorry, I got a little distracted there. But that's just the big thing, though, is that they could do it, but obviously, of course, all the arguments right now go against what want to say here? Go against, it's like, oh, it's all got to be Call of Duty stuff.
See, and it's almost like that's like Sony trying to say, we, we only want to prove that, you can play the game that everyone else can play on our system too. But if it's gone ever, then we're screwed. I don't think that's the case. I think that gives them the chance to prove their excellence in other forms. And they're just not they're it's almost like they're trying to avoid being creative, honestly, and they're trying to just pay for other people's creativity and just letting it go on the wayside for the time being.
Possibly. I mean, that could very well be it. Is that it's like they've driven enough innovation with a lot of the stuff that they've done, but it's like it's not an
Mhm.
excuse to not reintroduce some of these things though anyway, and to continue to rely on this one franchise to help with things here. But everybody seems to think that this is centered on Call of Duty, which makes sense. But I mean, even like what it comes down to for part of this as well is that it's like the um, sorry, hang on, my daughter has decided to hop out of bed here. So um,
You're good.
yeah, there we go. Okay, she ran off there. It's like an example here is that it's like the UK regulators here. This kind of moves on a little bit more in our stories. This kind of jumps here. Is that UK regulators think that they should spin off the Call of Duty part of the business, which really for Activision, that's like what 98% of the business, given that every developer under Activision's umbrella, save for the Blizzard folks, are working on Call of Duty.
At the moment, yeah. You think about it, all the other franchises that they put in cold storage just so they could have those teams work on Call of Duty instead. Tony Hawk, Spyro, you name it. It's in the vault right now because all those teams, Toys for Bob, uh, oh, shoot, is it Never? It wasn't
Neversoft.
Neversoft.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess it was still Neversoft. Yeah,
Yeah.
Neversoft. They all got absorbed, and they all got instead of continuing to work on the projects that they were working on successfully for Activision, they were put onto Call of Duty.
Yeah, exactly. And so like what the UK regulator says here on this is they provided in their report four different things. Divestiture of the business associated with Call of Duty. Again, that's going to be all of Activision. Divestiture of Activision segment of Activision Blizzard Inc. Again, same thing. Divestiture of the Activision segment and the Blizzard segment, which that just seems like again the same thing. And then prohibition of the merger. Um, so basically, it'd be one of those things where it's like they would go to sell off the sections that they would need to be able to make this happen. And could we potentially have that happen? Maybe is the way for this to work, where Activision Blizzard do actually separate, and then Microsoft picks up Blizzard on its own instead. I mean, the
I don't
possibility's
know.
there about that happening, but I don't know because Activision has a lot under its belt. But because it's been so heavily invested in its Call of Duty titles, I mean, I don't know.
It's almost like they're saying, well, you can still buy them, but they have to sell off 3/4 of their licenses, so you're buying a hollow company.
In a manner of speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like what they said here is like these are provisional findings, which means the CMA sets forth its concerns in writing, and both parties have a chance to respond. Let's see. We hope between now and April we'll be able to help the CMA better understand our industry to ensure they can achieve their stated mandate to promote an environment where people can be confident they are getting great choices and fair deals, where competitive, fair dealing business can innovate and thrive, and where the whole UK economy can grow productively and sustainably. And that was from Activision Blizzard spokesperson Joseph Kristinat, or Kristinat, probably, if I butchered that there. I mean, we already know that the whole thing's facing scrutiny anyway, but the idea, though, of everything being split off to make it work, I've seen that happen, of course, anyway. We've seen that happen with other mergers where some parts have to be sold off. Like when T-Mobile and Sprint came together, they had to sell off parts of the business there. I think it was the same way, like when AT&T and DirecTV came together. There were some things that had to be sold off there as well. That's part of it itself. It's a little interesting in the game side of it, though, especially. Like it's very interesting because of how rooted the rest of the Activision org is just really in developing Call of Duty instead of those original core titles that they were all, better off with. But in the last bit, at least on the drama part here, though, is that Sony's actually saying that Microsoft is harassing them for information. So, of course, because this is all court-related right now, and there's discovery filings, they want to, Sony needs to see things from Microsoft. Microsoft needs to see things from Sony. Sony is basically saying that Microsoft is asking for so much detail that it's actually basically becoming borderline harassment. They're asking for things like they're asking for files on Sony execs, including performance reviews. They're also talking about, I guess there were some other documents. I'd seen another article on this too. Sony had actually put in their filing, they had said Microsoft's demand for performance reviews for SIE leadership is obvious harassment. Even in employment cases, courts require a specific showing of relevance before requiring production of personnel files. This is not an employment case. And of course, the judge over the actual case right now sided with Sony on this one. So that means at least that whatever's going on with Sony right now, at least, or at least whatever's being asked of them, I guess they believe it's at least at the level that they don't need to deliver on some of these things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. To that level, it almost sounds far-fetched. Why would you be asking for employee performance reviews? I mean, I could understand asking about, the performance of a game, or over a certain course of time, or about a certain game's launch, 5-10 years ago, because Sony would have that access to that record, and they'd be the ones most readily available to give the answer, or most accurate answer anyway. In fact, I would think that'd be something they might be proud of, especially if it was a big number to share. But Microsoft asking for employee reviews and performance reports and stuff, that just seems a little bonkers. Why would they do that?
I guess it depends on how far they want to go in regards to actually finding things out here. But yeah, there are some things about that just seem a little off, but we don't know the full length of of information that was requested as a part of discovery.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, if it did go to court, and they did side with Sony, I mean, obviously there was a ruling carried out, so there had to have been some sort of truth found in the actual case contended before Sony, so or brought before Sony, so
yeah, it's it's interesting to think about. But I am curious to think about exactly like how much stuff they are asking for, and at the end, what that's going to really look like in regards to the case here itself. Like
Right.
Microsoft even said, it's like has already told SIE it would consent to a fourth extension of time to negotiate issues related to the scope of the subpoena's request. But Microsoft believes that court intervention is required now on one issue: whether SIE will collect and produce documents from certain custodians. So they think that, so Microsoft's putting it out here that says like, well, if they're holding up like this saying that it's harassment, then it could also be construed as stalling. That Sony is basically trying to make it so that way they that they stall all the way through up until, I guess, some certain probably time frame or what have you. I don't know.
Yeah, probably till some sort of time frame runs out that the deal can't be potentially closed on, or maybe it causes some sort of financial duress on one of the two companies that they actually have to pull out of any acquisition deal, allowing Sony to either swoop in or another company to swoop in and be like an angel investor and save that company. I don't know. There's lots of potentially negative or adverse things that could turn out after that. But
Agreed.
I just would like this whole thing to get resolved. Unfortunately, this is another one that it just it's spiraling out of control.
It really is. It's just it keeps going and going, and we're coming up closer and closer to the deadline that they wanted to close this out, which I think was June of this year. So we've got a very interesting, I guess, several months ahead of us to see exactly what else is going to play out here in the courts. But let's move on to our last story here for the evening before we get into our quest markers, and that is about Nintendo again. Of course, I know we talked direct stuff, but Nintendo also had their financial reporting out, and they made it clear that the Nintendo Switch has cleared 122 million units sold, which means that it has now surpassed a new record and has actually now sold more than the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, which originally had a record of 118.69 million, and Sony's PlayStation 4 at 117.2 million units. So that means that the Switch is still by far one of the better selling consoles out there, but it still apparently has a way to go until it hits the DS's record of 154.02 million and PlayStation 2 155 million. So
Well, it
got a ways to go.
I don't know it I will say like 6 months ago I would say they were right on track, but then I saw some of the Famitsu news today, over the last week, and actually last month, Sony dominated the sales charts for consoles
Notice that
and
too,
put
yeah.
yeah, it actually put the Switch, I believe it was in third place. This is the first time in like 13 months that they've been anywhere but first place on that list. So
I wonder if that's
kind
more of
of
a
kind of
sign that
crazy.
I wonder if that's more of a sign that the supply chain issues have kind of subsided for Sony. I wonder if that's the case
I
because you
think
think that's what,
potentially partially,
yeah.
but it is the Famitsu sales chart as well. And you also have to keep in mind that during the initial launch of the PS5 and the Xbox, of course, because that was in the number 2 spot on the sales chart for last month, um, they really focused heavily on the U.S. market. So I feel like there were more consoles out in the wild in the U.S. market than you were able to see out in like Europe or in the Asian market, or in any of the other markets for that matter. There was just more here in the U.S. As far as both Sony and Microsoft. But now at the start of the year, yeah, the supply chain has come back, and I feel like they are hitting the Japanese market in particularly specifically hard, because it's one market that they've lacked in since the launch of the console.
Yeah. Yeah, especially since so on Nintendo's front, especially here, is that they say they're probably not going to sell as many Switches, of course, going into the second quarter, because it seems like we might be at a stage now where the people who want a Switch already have it. It's expecting potentially 18 million by the end of March, And then 20 million. Yeah, they were originally predicting 19 million in the previous quarter and 21 million before, but now they're predicting about 18. So they're looking at least a downturn there. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be short of it, though, is that it could be spiked by the actual titles that we have coming out over the next few months, which we just talked about. So, yeah, they've even list here. So on Video Games Chronicle, they actually list out the top 10 best-selling Switch games as of the end of 2022. Mario Kart 8 at number 1, Animal Crossing New Horizons at 2, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate at 3, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild at 4, Pokemon Sword and Shield at 5, Super Mario Odyssey at 6, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet at 7, Super Mario Party's at 8, Ring Fit Adventures at 9, and Pokemon Let's Go is at number 10. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely sales going on there, especially for the fact that, like, the number 7 top-selling game for the Switch is Scarlet and Violet, and that game only just came out. And, of course, you can see here 20.61 million units sold since that game came out, and that's only, I think, over, a 2-month period, because that game came out in November, I think. Yeah. But the other part, of course, at least to the news, though, is that kind of talking about here, it's that other part about the no layoffs in Japan. So outside of the Switch record, of course, though, is that Nintendo, of course, is a tech company. We're currently seeing a lot of upheaval in the tech world, specifically as it relates to layoffs. Of course, all the big companies have been doing layoffs, Google, Microsoft. We've been seeing them, of course, out of Amazon, Facebook, or Meta, however you want to call it there. A lot of these big tech companies have been laying people off. However, it looks like Nintendo, even though it said it was lowering its forecast for Switch sales and that a little bit of a decline in profit, they are not going to be laying anybody off, and instead will be actually providing a raise of 10%, 10% salary increase to all of its staff in Japan. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't lay people off, but at least the way it looks in Japan right now is that they're actually going to be taking care of their people there. So in the article, it says, according to Reuters, Nintendo president Shintaro Furukawa told an earnings call on Tuesday that, quote, it's important for our long-term growth to secure our workforce. So they are doing this raise, though, mostly because they are... mostly because they want to make sure that they are taking care of their people. He even goes on, let's see, the article says here, as many pointed out in the wake of the wave of the efficient tech layoffs in January, beloved former Nintendo president Satoru Iwata once said, if we reduce the number of employees for better short-term financial results, employee morale will decrease. I sincerely doubt employees who fear they may be laid off will be able to develop software titles that can impress people around the world. So Furukawa may very well be actually following Iwata's advice on how to actually handle the employees and the situation, of course, that they're in right now. So good on you, Nintendo. Good on you.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Take care of your people. But because, of course, we were pretty loaded down with news there for those three things, that is it for the main news here. And I believe, Kyle, we have ourselves, one quest marker for today?
Yeah, all of the one quest marker for today. That was all I could kind of come up with. I was kind of running short. But that's okay. I felt like this was one of the littlest, biggest quest markers of the week. So let's just get right into it. With Team Fortress 2 planning on releasing a quote-unquote full-on update-sized update.
Wow.
Of course, Team Fortress 2 launched 16 years ago. And while the game has had some updates for summer events that they've launched, I want to say it's just been a few skins during the updates, or a few items. This one will actually is promising items, skins, maps, taunts, unusual effects, and more to be added to the game. So it is definitely the biggest update the game has seen in probably, I want to say, a good 6 or 8 years. if not
Oh,
longer.
wow. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, pretty awesome that I mean, Valve has just been killing it in the last year with the release of the Steam Deck, and this is right on the tail end of having the Index release, and it was an excellent unit. Got a lot of praise for a VR unit, and yeah, they just keep rolling. Of course, the one thing to add about it is the update. They are calling on community help for content for the update. So if you've got some old projects that you've been working on for Team Fortress 2, maybe it's time to dust off that code and submit it into the community projects to see if it makes it into the newest update.
Awesome.
But with that is it for the quest marker.
Yeah, that is
this
it.
week.
That is. And because that is the only quest marker we have, of course, that means that is the end of the weekly news roundup for the week of November 10th, 2023. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here in what will probably be the last news roundup live stream, at least for some time. Of course, don't worry, though. We will be back, of course, with different content coming up here on the channel as time goes on. But, of course, there will still be a weekly news roundup, but in podcast form. So be sure to go subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform of choice. You can find us on our homepage at anchor.fm/the-NPCs-podcast. And you can find us there you can either subscribe directly on there itself, or you can find us on your favorite podcast platform of choice. Things such as Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, you name it, we are probably on it. Follow us on social media, and of course, follow us here on YouTube. So when the new content does start coming up, you'll be able to grab onto it right away and check in with us as things continue on. With all of that, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's News Roundup. We will catch you all next time.
Laters.